Now it's time for me to talk about Star Wars The Force Awakens and my brief opinion of the show, of the movie, was that it was a good movie. It was definitely better than Phantom Menace. In fact, I'd say it was significantly better than Phantom Menace. And I don't think it's the best Star Wars movie I've seen, because right now my favorite Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi, but it's overall, or whatever, the movie was and is overall good, despite a lot of problems with it. And of course, I'm not the only Star Wars nut who's seen these problems. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is the surprising, or even not so surprising, death of Han Solo. First of all, I unfortunately heard about his death before seeing the movie, and I'm pissed about that because it took away the raw emotions I would have felt if I didn't know in advance that Han was going to die. But then again, even in fiction, you can't expect all your main characters to survive. So yeah, when you think about it, I guess Han had to die at one point or another. So, I still wish I hadn't heard of his death beforehand, or heard about his death beforehand. But at the same time, his death was kind of predictable. Even though it looked as if Kylo, what's the guy's name, Kylo Ren, whatever, was gonna change his mind and go home with his dad and all this stuff. But and stuff changed and stuff happened and whatever. I should talk about this particular side of the show, element of the show later, but I want to go to another issue, to another related issue, and one of those issues is when Finn and Rey found the Millennium Falcon. That was like at least at that point in time in the movie, the best part of the movie. The part where where Finn says, "Hey, there's a ship we can try and we can fly off to," and then Finn and Rey says, "That ship's garbage." And of course, they had to take the garbage because the ship they wanted to take got blown up by the First Order. And yes, that first Millennium Falcon scene was kick-ass and whatever. It's like seeing an old friend return or whatever the fuck. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that was a good scene. That also the flying through the wreckage of the Star Destroyers or whatnot, that also kicked ass. However, one of the worst aspects of this movie, was the planetary rings that don't orbit. Of course, that doesn't happen in real life. Planetary rings orbit. It's not a bunch of rocks that just lay there. They orbit, because if objects don't orbit something, they're going to fall to the surface of the planet or whatever. Because if you look at photos of Saturn or other ring planets or whatever, and the rings do consist of smaller particles, but those particles have to orbit. If they don't orbit, they fall out of orbit. That's how orbit works. And let's see, here's a good one. I think one of my favorite scenes was when they made a light speed jump inside the cargo bay of that ship, that cargo ship or whatever. That kicked ass. That freaked me the frack out. It reminded me of that scene in the new Battlestar Galactica, where the Galactica made an FTL jump in a planetary atmosphere, and that was also a kick-ass science fiction scene too. Yeah, see, that, I guess that hyper jump they made to that particular scene of the movie is possibly one of my favorites, mainly because it's something that you have not seen before in Star Wars. Or more to the point, a lot of what's seen in this movie has been done before, but seeing something that's not done before is what really pleased me, to put it nicely, put it shortly, whatever. Let's see. And of course, there's those going to tell me that Star Wars is speculative fiction at best, a science fantasy at worst. You can't expect it to be scientifically accurate. I'm aware of that, but I'm the kind of science nerd who obsesses over this sort of thing. You don't have to follow my lead, but that's what I do. Yes, and then another thing about the movie is that Luke Han and Leia got old. Boy, did they get old. But of course, that's to be expected because it's 30 years later. And then, of course, that might be what you might call the reason why they added the fresh blood, the fresh crew in. Because The Force Awakens is essentially Star Wars, The Next Generation. And let's see, this other thing I kind of had a problem with. I think the biggest problem, aside from the plot holes, one of the biggest problems I had with the movie, aside from the plot holes, is that the movie needed more exposition. It would have been great if it explained more in more detail about the events that happened between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. Yeah, I know that opening scroll explained a little bit, but they were just too vague about things. It would have been more interesting to me if they explained specifically what happened. I mean, I guess they wouldn't have to go into too much detail, but they should have went into enough detail so you get a basic idea of what happened between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And then I have the question of where did that supreme leader come from? That guy sucked, man. What an evil frack. And which reminds me of the scene when Kylo Ren took off his helmet. At first I thought he was going to be twisted and distorted, but no, he looked like some supermodel dude practically. But the Supreme Leader, on the other hand, was twisted and distorted. Yeah. What about that? Yeah, and also, seems to me, one of the biggest problems, I guess, the biggest technical problems possibly was the Star Killer base. When it came to the Death Star, they did go into reasonable, sensible explanations as to how it was built and where it came from and all that. But Star Killer base, on the other hand, it's like it popped out of nowhere, and it's supposed to be many times bigger than both the previous Death Stars, and it worked on a process that kind of doesn't make sense, and they were too vague about it. Because here's the big problem I have with it. I mean, you're one of the big problems about it, and the whole explanation of it. Anyway, here's my understanding of how it works, and I'm probably going to be wrong because this whole thing is so confusing. Here it is. Okay, this is my understanding how the Star Killer base works. Okay, Star Killer base absorbs all the energy of a star. Then it redirects that energy to multiple planets to destroy them. If that's correct, it still doesn't make sense because you don't need to suck up all the energy of a star to destroy a planet. You could suck up maybe 1/1,000,000,000% of all the energy of a star to destroy a planet or even multiple planets. Because, for example, it's been said that the amount of sunlight that hits the Earth in 1 hour is roughly equal to the amount of energy that humans use in 1 year's time. So 1 hour of sunlight on the Earth's surface is equal to 1 year's worth of human energy usage. But that sunlight that hits the sun is a tiny fraction of all the sun's light, a tiny fraction of all the sun's energy. So what that means is that, I guess at any given time, the amount of sunlight that hits the Earth is perhaps 1/1000,000th the total amount of energy emitted from the sun. And then, of course, the sun is a yellow dwarf star, which means that, at least as far as the stars visible from Earth through the naked eye, the sun is tiny, it is microscopic, it is minuscule. And yet there are other stars in the universe that emit more energy, that are larger, more massive, more powerful, all kinds of stuff. And yet, the Star Wars writers seem to think that stars are somewhat the same size as planets and don't emit that much energy. But they do, because if your average star has a multi-billion-year lifespan, they do emit a lot of energy. Yeah, you know what I should do is talk about that particular scientific inaccuracy in more detail in another video. That's a good idea. Let's see. I think I did mention that they didn't do much new in The Force Awakens. Did I mention it? Well, whatever the case, I'm going to say it again. And the thing about The Force Awakens, even though it was a good movie, one of the problems I had is that they did stuff that's been done before. But let's see. I want to bring up a couple of new things. I might as well bring up a couple of new things. Aside from the hyper jump in the cargo bay, like BB-8 is a new thing. The Star Killer base, a new thing, though I think it's lame. But most of the Force Awakens seem to consist largely of things that have been done before. Space battles have been done before. Let's see, you have your blaster fights have been done before. Your lightsaber battles have been done before. You know, all things of that sort have been done before. And because today's special effects are so vastly superior to those of the past, then, you know, this whole special effect overkill, I'm not going to call it that. I'm not going to call it that for lack of a better word. So, anyways, the special effect overkill is kind of mainstream and normal because, you know, when the original Star Wars came out, and its special effect overkill was something that freaked the frack out of people. Like, whoa, I've never seen this stuff. Look at this stuff. Oh, wow, this is crazy stuff. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Anyway. But now it's this normal to see vivid visual effects in practically every movie you see. But whatever. Anyway, let's see. Other opinions I have about the movie are the scenes of the wrecked, crashed Star Destroyers and other similar ships and wreckage on the planet Jakku. I love seeing that because it showed how incredibly huge those spaceships are. They're ginormous. They're gargantuan. Huge. Whoa, yeah. Let's see. And then, of course, there's, what's that girl's name? Rey. Her real name is Daisy Ridley. Yep. Smoking hot woman. Yeah. A femininely delicate beauty, as I like to call her. And let's see. One thing that I didn't see in The Force Awakens is feminist propaganda. I've been told or have heard that there's feminist propaganda in this movie. It's anti-male. It's feminist. It's evil. I have no idea where that came from. I did not see a lick of feminist propaganda. Absolutely none. Maybe I should read the blogs and vlogs or whatever the fuck about this claim, but right now I do not see a lick of feminist propaganda in The Force Awakens, and I'm a hardcore anti-feminist. And I think the final thing I want to bring up is the expertise that certain characters showed when wielding a lightsaber. Now, let's see. Some might say that Finn, being in the military, had some combat experience, or at least combat training, so maybe it is possible for him to know how to use a lightsaber. But if I remember correctly, lightsabers are something that's were primarily used by the Jedi, and with the Jedi having been pretty much gone for several decades, then, you know, very few people will know how to use one of those. But then, of course, there's Rey, who mystically and magically is able to use a lightsaber like a pro. You know, she probably never saw one before until the time she went to what's that girl's name? To Maz's castle or whatever. And of course, I think some people say, oh, because Rey's got that force power in her, it just magically came to her or some such thing. Yeah, but I guess that's possible. But what's worse than that is that Kylo Ren, who's supposed to have been trained for many years on Jedi tactics and whatnot, got beat up by her practically. Of course, it might be that he was all emotionally unstable, which interfered with his lightsabering skills. Yep, that sounds like a good excuse. Is it a good excuse? Perhaps, perhaps not. Yes, I would like to talk more and more about this, but my notes have run out, and I got stuff to do. I'm behind schedule because I've been obsessed with this Monopoly game that I've been playing for the past few weeks. So, with all that said, peace, the science out.